Let's talk about the ugly continuity between slavery's fancy girl trade and Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking empire, and what it says about power in America. The business of bodies, from slave auctions to private jets. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes in disturbing ways. In the 1800s, in places like New Orleans, Richmond, and Charleston, slave markets didn't only sell field hands. They sold something more sinister: young enslaved women marketed as fancy girls. These women weren't bought to pick cotton. They were bought to be raped, kept, displayed, bred, controlled. Slave traders described skin tone, body shape, age, and obedience the way people describe luxury cars today. Buyers paid more for youth and light skin. Some men kept them as secret wives. Others rented them out. It was sexual trafficking made legal by government. Fast forward 150 years. Jeffrey Epstein didn't stand in a public square with chains. He stood behind gates, jets, and lawyers. Instead of auctions, he used grooming, modeling promises, cash payments, intimidation, connections. But the product was the same: access to girls' bodies for powerful men. One system used whips and bills of sale. The other used NDAs and influence. Same logic, different costume. Why the powerful always get involved? Whether plantation owners or billionaires, sexual trafficking attracts the elite for one reason: it removes accountability. When someone believes they are untouchable, desire becomes domination. In slavery, law protected abuse. In Epstein's world, money blurred prosecution. That's why his client list scared people, not because sex crimes are rare, but because the men involved expected protection, just like slaveholders once did. The marketplace mentality. Both systems reduce humans to inventory. Slavery ads once read, open quote, "Fine young fancy girl, 16 years, good figure, healthy," close quote. Epstein's recruiters said, open quote, "Pretty girls, easy money, rich connections," close quote. Different language, same trap. Both markets thrive on youth, vulnerability, beauty, silence. And once inside, victims aren't people, they're assets. The silence around it. Another similarity, the cover-up culture. Plantations hid abuse behind respectability. Epstein hid it behind philanthropy. People knew. They always do. But power discourages truth. Victims fear retaliation. Witnesses fear careers dying. Communities fear scandal. So exploitation survives because silence is profitable. The psychological damage. What people don't talk about enough. Both slavery victims and Epstein's victims suffer identity theft of the soul. They aren't just hurt physically. They're taught. Your body is not yours. Your no doesn't matter. Your value is transactional. That damage lasts decades. Freedom on paper doesn't erase captivity in the mind. Why this still matters today? Modern trafficking didn't come from nowhere. It's a descendant of slave markets, colonial exploitation, gender violence, elite entitlement. We abolished slavery, but we didn't abolish the appetite for ownership. So now it hides in modeling scams, influencer culture, private islands, online grooming, luxury networks. Epstein wasn't an exception. From plantation bedrooms to Manhattan mansions, when society lets power override humanity, someone always starts selling people. Chains become contracts, auctions become flights, owners become clients, but the crime stays the same. And historians have documented this clearly. A significant number of enslaved children who were described as mulatto, quadroon, or later marketed as fancy were the result of sexual assault by enslavers or white men in positions of power. That's not speculation. That's documented in plantation records, slave narratives, court cases, bills of sale, and advertisements. Under slavery, enslaved women had no legal protection against rape. In fact, in most slave states, rape laws did not apply when the victim was enslaved. The system legally protected the enslaver. The reality behind fancy girls. The term fancy girl referred to enslaved women, often lighter-skinned, who were sold specifically for sexual exploitation. Many of them were daughters of enslaved women and white slaveholders, daughters of overseers, or children born from coerced relationships. This created a horrific cycle. 1. A slaveholder rapes an enslaved woman. 2. A mixed-race child is born. 3. That child is legally enslaved because of partus sequitur ventrum, status follows the mother. 4. If the child is female and considered light or attractive, she could later be sold at a premium for sexual exploitation. In other words, the system profited from rape across generations. And yes, boys too. Your mixed-race boys were sometimes sold as domestic servants, sometimes trained as skilled labor, sometimes exploited sexually, and often resented by white families because they physically resembled the enslaver. While the term fancy trade was mostly used for girls, sexual abuse of boys absolutely occurred, though it was less openly marketed. Why mixed ancestry was so common? By the mid-1800s, a large percentage of enslaved people in the Upper South had some European ancestry. Not because of consensual interracial relationships, but because enslaved women could not refuse. There were no legal consequences for white perpetrators. Children increased a slaveholder's wealth. Some enslavers even forced breeding practices. This is one of the most brutal truths about American slavery. It wasn't just labor exploitation, it was reproductive exploitation. The legal structure that made it possible. The key law was Partus Sequitur Ventrem, 1662 Virginia. A child's status followed the mother. That meant if the mother was enslaved, the child was enslaved, even if the father was the white slave owner. So rape increased property. That legal structure incentivized sexual violence. The psychological violence beyond the physical abuse, there was forced separation from mothers, children sold away, mixed-race children sometimes rejected by both black and white communities, enslaved mothers forced to raise children who visibly resembled their abuser. That trauma echoed for generations. Important distinction. Slavery created a system where sexual violence was normalized, mixed children increased wealth, and entire bloodlines were shaped by exploitation. That legacy didn't disappear in 1865. It shaped colorism, racial hierarchies, inheritance gaps, and social identity conflicts that still exist today. What links slavery's fancy trade and the Epstein scandal is not race and not even time period. It's power plus sexual access plus profit, protection. That combination repeats across history. Now fast forward to Epstein. Epstein did not own people legally, but he created a system where young girls were recruited. Access to them was facilitated for wealthy men. Money and influence shielded participants. Victims were pressured into silence. Legally different system, morally similar structure. In both cases, young people became commodities. The difference between legal slavery and criminal trafficking: slavery, state-sanctioned, written into law, protected by courts, openly commercial. Epstein, illegal, hidden behind wealth, protected through influence and connections, prosecuted, though many argue not fully. One was law-backed exploitation, the other was influence-backed exploitation. But both rely on the same calculation. Can I get away with this? About boys in the Epstein case. Most confirmed Epstein victims were teenage girls. Public court records and civil suits overwhelmingly involve girls aged roughly 14 to 17. There have been scattered mentions and speculation about boys in broader trafficking discussions. But the main documented Epstein cases center on girls. No large confirmed group of underage boys tied directly to Epstein has been publicly established the way the girls' cases have. That doesn't mean boys aren't trafficked globally. They absolutely are. It just means Epstein's documented pattern focused primarily on girls. The deeper connection. Systems that protect the powerful. In slavery, the system protected slaveholders. Victims had no voice. Wealth equaled control. In Epstein's world, wealth and connections slowed consequences. Institutions failed to act early. Victims feared retaliation. That's the real through line. When power concentrates, accountability weakens. And when accountability weakens, exploitation grows. What has changed and what hasn't changed? Slavery is abolished. Rape laws apply regardless of status. Trafficking is illegal. Victims can sue and testify. Not fully changed. Vulnerable youth are still targeted. Money can delay justice. Social status can intimidate victims. Silence protects predators. The chains look different now, but exploitation adapts. The hard truth. Slavery created a culture where sexual exploitation of the powerless was normalized. Wealth insulated perpetrators. Children could be turned into assets. Modern trafficking scandals show that mindset didn't disappear. It just became illegal and secret. The form changes. The temptation remains.